Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin al-ma'sumin al-muntajabin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Sisters and brothers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The focus for this week conversation, as well as the next few weeks, will be the modern history of Palestine and what I call the Zionist project. We all know, if we research, that Palestine has a long, rich history. The term Palestine first appeared in the 5th century before current era, when ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote a book on history. And if you go to Google and search timeline of the name of Palestine, it comes up historically how Palestine, in the context of Syria and in the context of itself, has been used. That's not something that I want to focus upon. I want to focus upon on what is considered to be the modern history of Palestine. And modern history of Palestine starts probably, alaykum salam, probably we can, it's a flexible timeline, but at least from beginning of the 20th century, say late 1890s and beginning of the 20th century. And I will explain later why I believe so. We need, as people who are associated in one way or the other with the issue of Palestine, whether you are Lebanese, whether you are Palestinian, whether you are Iraqis, whether you are Iranians, whatever you are, Palestine constitutes a pivotal concept and reality in our life that we need to preserve and protect and learn how to deal with the questions that are thrown out by two groups of people. Most of the current crises we have to deal with either what we call the myth, the religious myth, theological myth, that somehow this is a promised land. And by the way, the people refuting this myth is not just the Western scholars. There are a number of scholars in Jewish circle, academic circle, that they have focused on the fact that this myth is constructed and has no reality. One of the books that I used many years ago is Thomas Thompson, Mythic Past, Biblical Archaeology and the Myth of Israel. He has two books, one about the myth of Israel, the other one is the myth of Christianity. The author's name is Thomas L. Thompson. So the theological one, he goes through a systematic way of refuting this notion of the preserved or God-granted land, etc., the chosen race, etc., etc. Some contemporary Jewish scholars have done the same thing, that there is no, when we consider there is no chosen race, there is no promised land, there is nothing, it's all fabricated. Particularly when we look at the whole return, using the current Pentateuch of the books that they have to support an argument, when the books themselves are fabricated, they are man-made and authored. These are not revelations. But also I would like our friends here to focus on the secular arguments that are being presented in favor of the Zionist project that we have constantly being used in the debate about Palestinian issue. There are a number of good books available here, which I, again, choose one of them, at least do some reading. The first book, the first author that I strongly recommend is Dr. Rashid Khalidi, and he has a number of books. The 100 Years' War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonial Conquest and Resistance from 1917 to 2017. Number 2, The Iron Cage, the Story of Palestinian Struggle for a Statehood. Brokers of Deceit, How the US has Undermined Peace Process in the Middle East. And at the moment, still they are doing the same thing. There is another book which is extremely useful. This is by Walter Lancoeur, which is a French author. A History of Zionism from the French Revolution to the Establishment of a State of Israel, which goes literally in the 18th, 19th century, comes to the 20th century. A famous author, a Palestinian author, Edward Said, who became extremely known by his book on Orientalism. He has a number of books about Palestine. These are all Palestinians themselves. The Question of Palestine is number 1. The Politics of Dispossession is number 2. The End of Peace Process, Oslo and After, number 3. Peace and Its Discontent, Essays on Palestine. These are 4 major books. You can choose one of them if you wish. Another controversial figure in the question of Palestine and the myth of the State of Israel is Roger Garudi, the French philosopher, that he has the founding myth of the modern Israel, which was one of the books that he became well known and was published. The second one is The Case of Israel, the Study of Political Zionism, again extremely useful. Chomsky, the famous linguist, has a number of books. I have few of them in my library, and in collaboration with another Jewish author and scholar, Ilan Pappé, on Palestine and Gaza in Crisis. These are books that have been written, and Fateful Triangle, which I have it over there. These are only few of his books on the issue of Palestine. Recently, a younger scholar, Norman Finkelstein, has a number of books that I recommend. You can choose one of them. Gaza, An Inquest into its Martyrdom, the Holocaust Industry, and how there is a similarity between the theme and the concept that he argues in the Holocaust Industry and what Garudi argues in his book, the Holocaust Industry, and how the Zionists use the Holocaust as something to support or their genocide, etc., etc. Because if you listen to the Zionist scholars, whether in the United States or anywhere else, their argument rests on 3 fundamental principles. Number 1, the Holocaust removed all moral principle. There is no moral principle after Holocaust. That's number 1. Number 2, we are the chosen race. This is the theological angle. We are the chosen race and everybody else is subservient. And the third is specifically about the Palestinians, that the Palestinians are subhumans. So even international law regarding human rights and so on does not apply to anything that you do to Palestinians, because they are subhumans. If you go back to the 7th of October 2023, within a few days, this concept of subhuman nature of the Palestinian became something that everybody talked about. From ministers to teachers to professors, they went online, subhuman they are. Their argument is similar to the apartheid regime in South Africa and the other a country which turned into Zimbabwe after. These are the white settler state that they would consider the African natives to be subhuman. I remember during my time at the University of London, Imperial College, the first day that I went to school, and the professor was an Australian professor came. We were surprised to go into this lecture theater, and there is a big map stuck on the wall. Human development from monkeys until they became the white man. So the African, the black, and so on, it was considered somewhere in the middle, that they are not fully developed human beings. So this was part of the Darwinian theory that the racist African, they used it quite often. So I had a long argument with the professor regarding this issue, which I paid a price for it for the 4 years that I was at Imperial College. That's a different story. A Nation on Trial, Goldhagen Thesis and Historical Truth. That's a very good book that you can use it against the Jewish community that they support you. This is their own argument against Germans after the Second World War. You can use it against the Jewish community that support genocide and the Zionism in the current crisis. The Image and Reality of Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. And this time we went too far. Truth, Consequences of the Gaza Invasion. These are all different books. At least you should choose one. I would recommend, if you want to focus on even one book, to go back to Rashid Khalidi's book, the first one, The 100 Years War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonial Conquest and Resistance from 1917 to 2017. This book, I believe, was written sometimes beginning of 2000. He became the professor at the university where Edward Said used to teach, and after he died, he was accepted as the teaching professor. So both Edward Said as well as Rashid Khalidi, they are extremely good books. For those who speak Farsi, I strongly recommend a translation by Said Hadi Khosrow Shahi, مسئله فلسطین و ماهیت طرح صهیونیسم. This is a translation of Rashid al-Ghanouchi, the Tunisian Ikhwan Muslimin leader, and what the crude translation of the title, The Question of Palestine and the Zionist Project, which I have used it for the discussion that we are going to have, inshallah. We cannot address the modern story, the modern history of Palestine, unless we somehow deconstruct a number of concepts and address them one by one and then come back to conclude. The first one that by the way, when you do some research, if you look at the footnote or endnote, you certainly come across a number of other books and other articles that underscore the theme and can be used for future project. And this is something we are confronted with, a reality. Our community, that they should have all the facts at their disposal. Unfortunately, they don't have enough understanding of what is happening in Palestine beyond and around, and what is the project, the Zionist project, beyond some knee-jerk emotional reaction to it. We really don't have in-depth understanding. On the other hand, we are confronted by Zionists and Israeli supporters that have articulated, well-defined language and narrative that you cannot challenge them unless you have an equally articulated language based on facts to deal with them. We go to it and we emotionally react, This is why they always win. So it is critical that our youth and the little bit younger generation or mature generation spend some time and study it. The best way of dealing with this issue is to have a space where one could use pictures and videos and so on to clearly state this concept of what's going on. So that is a different story that we don't have it here, but certainly spend some time reading about the crisis. The first topics that I believe is necessary for us is something that we normally discuss in the political science and the sociology, etc., and that is colonialism. What is colonialism? Colonialism is something that developed mostly in the contemporary time in Western Europe, where you have major powers going around and establishing a colony somewhere else. And based on the purpose for the establishment of that colony, the colonialism is divided into various, at least 4 different categories. Surrogate colonialism, which applies to the case of the State of Israel, is a term used most notably by anthropologists and specifically there are ones that specifically use it in the case of the Palestinians, where the power to be the colonizer brings in individuals that has nothing to do with the colonizer themselves. They are not part of, say, the British or the French. They do not bring French or the British to settle over there. They bring individuals or people, non-native groups, over land occupied by indigenous people. So they bring Ashkenazi Jews from other parts of Europe that they are nothing to do with the British, and then they bring them and settle them in a particular place. In the case of Israel, for the Palestinian, the mission of Ashkenazi Zionism in Palestine is a form of surrogate colonialism. Surrogate, we have talked, you understand surrogate is the middle. Say surrogate mother or surrogate father in the medical term, etc., etc. So the mission of Ashkenazis, they are considered to be the whole project is considered to be a surrogate colonialism because it was forged based on a strategic consensus with the ruling British Empire. And the consensus, we talked about it, and we will talk about it inshallah next week, how the Balfour Agreement and few other projects came in, and how the whole creation of a State of Israel come to exist. We have to deal also with what we call landowners in Palestine and Aqta'in and others, that they did not see what is coming. And they began to sell the land to absentee rich owners, family Zionists that are living outside with huge amount of money paying for their lands. If you go back to 1928, 29, and you see how much land the Palestinian owned, by 1936, 37, how much of it has been purchased. Legally, they could come back to the British government and say, well, these are our lands, and we can bring in whoever we want into this land. At the moment, they are doing it in northern Iraq and part of Iraq, land that they want to go. And in Saudi Arabia, they are buying land around Khaybar, so the Qal'a or the castle. And they have, the Zionist project is something. They had a plan that up to now everybody said, well, it's a fiction of the mindset of the Muslims from Nile to the Euphrates. Suddenly in the last few weeks, this plan of the Greater Israel came out, and everybody is talking about it. It takes the shape of it, northern Arabian Peninsula, literally half of Iraq, the western side of Iraq, the entire Syria, and part of Turkey, Lebanon, and it goes across the Sinai Desert to the Nile. All of this is what they consider to be the Greater Israel, that ultimately they want to have, and they are working for it. So these are something, but the naivete of the landowners and the rich individuals that began to sell the land to these people is another factor in the whole thing. The role of the Arab leaders in the region, and they're working in cahoot with the Zionist project, it's another issue that we really need to discuss. So inshallah, we will start next week by focusing on the concept of colonialism, its various shape and unpack it well. There are examples of colonialism in which the colonial power brings its own people to settle. Australia, New Zealand, and some other parts of Africa and South America. These were people that emigrated, or the government helped to move from their land. Spain in particular, for example, in South America, that they send their people to go and settle in what is today Chile, Argentina, and other places. The Portuguese did the same in some part of South America. Brazil, for example, is another example. In Cuba, they brought their own people. So this is one kind of settler colonialism. What the French tried to do in Algeria, it was settler colonialism, and the French also began to develop the idea in Lebanon and Syria until there was a resistance against them, so they had to abandon it. But in Algeria, they tried it until the 1960s, when there was an uprising and call for freedom and emancipation, etc. The British practiced various types of colonialism. So surrogate colonialism is the one that we have to focus upon, because it directly involves with the issue of Palestine and how money worked its way in the United Nations to purchase the vote for the 1947-48 voting. 3 times the issue was brought by the Zionists before the United Nations for voting. Twice it failed. The 3rd time the famous Jewish rich individuals, Rothschild, got involved, and they paid South American poor countries to vote for it, while in the previous 2 votes they went against it, by rich amount of money, and the 3rd they succeeded. While the Saudis and others that were part of this, they were asleep. They didn't see what was coming. So that's something that inshallah we will discuss later. If there are any questions, we will address them, but please, if you have a chance, pick up any of these books, one of them, and start reading for next week. At least spend some time researching on colonialism, so that we will be able to, when we discuss and unpack it, and then you have some ideas of what's going on. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.